In just about an hour, the Utah mom accused of murdering her husband will be back in court, and we are expecting to learn when Kouri Richins' trial will start. Prosecutors say she poisoned her husband with a fentanyl-laced Moscow Mule. Months later, she wrote a children's book about grief. Richins' friends are coming forward now, insisting that she is innocent. In an interview with People magazine, one of Richins' friends suggested that her husband simply died of a drug overdose, and that the evidence against Kouri has been taken out of context. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Joshua Ritter, also the host of the True Crime Daily Sidebar podcast. It's good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Specifically, what are you listening for in today's hearing? And do you think that the judge will be setting a trial date today?
I expect that he will. I don't know if that trial date will remain the trial date, but it's usual that a judge wants to get these things on their docket and get them moving ahead. So I expect that they will set at least a target date. We'll see if they actually keep that date. But what we're going to be looking forward to is perhaps some motions regarding evidence. What's going to come in? How will be the landscape of the trial? These hearings are incredibly important, sometimes more important even than the things that are presented at trial. And what I mean by that is it really creates, like I said, the landscape of what the jurors are going to hear. What evidence is going to come in? What's going to be excluded? What won't be allowed? You talked a little bit about her family members and friends. Will they be called as character witnesses? What forensic evidence will we hear regarding that cocktail that he apparently drank before his death? So all of these things will be decided before the trial begins.
And I want to talk about this cup, because if we're talking about poison in a cup, you would think that a key piece of evidence would be the cup that Eric Richins drank from before he died. We know that a lead investigator is testifying that the cup was not ever tested for drugs. What do you make of that, and could that detail lead to an acquittal?
That's a huge detail. It's a huge thing for the defense because, listen, they don't have to prove a case. They just have to poke holes in the prosecution's case and create enough reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. And if one of those key questions is if the prosecution theory is he was poisoned by fentanyl that was put into his cocktail, well, then we want to see what was in that cocktail. If that wasn't tested, that is something that you can imagine will be exploited to a great degree by the defense, and rightfully so. This is the prosecution's case. You'd expect them to have that type of evidence. Now, if they have some sort of reasonable explanation for that, I'd like to hear it, but they're going to have to answer that question for the jurors.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we are starting to hear from some of Kouri Richins' friends. One of them says that her husband was not murdered, that he likely just died from a drug overdose. Do you expect the defense to put the victim on trial here?
To some extent, yes. And to a larger degree, I think what they're going to put on trial is just the fentanyl epidemic. They're going to talk about how people are losing their lives tragically, not mysteriously, not because of some sort of a plot to take people's lives, but they're losing their lives because fentanyl is such a deadly drug that we hear about these cases every single day. I imagine that the defense is going to say this is another one of those tragic cases. You can't now turn around and say that he was not a victim of this epidemic, but that this was actually her intent. It's an interesting argument. We'll see if it carries the day. I think it can be a powerful argument dealing with what we are dealing with in this country.
If jurors believe that Kouri was attempting to profit after her husband's death in that children's book about grief, could that alone present problems for her defense?
I think so. It's not going to paint her in a good light. If they believe at all that she may have been involved, there's some other reasons, some other motivations, life insurance and other things that may have been a motive for her to be involved in his murder. And if they feel that she then went about trying to profit off of that, that is going to really leave jurors with a bad taste in their mouths. The vindictiveness alone that might incur in all of them is something that the defense is really going to have to deal with. We'll see. Again, this will be another subject of these evidentiary hearings if that evidence of that book will come in.